So what's my presentation going to be on today? That's a good question. Well, it's going to be London Fire Brigade's approach to retrofitting sprinklers. I'm going to be covering a number of topics on that, so hopefully you find it very interesting and informative. And if you have any questions, I'll be pleased to answer any at the end of the presentation when we have our drinks later. So without further ado, let's get started. So first of all, I thought we'd focus on the legislation part of it first of all, in regard to residential sprinklers. Now, this is really much key for me on the subject of retrofitting. At the present time, I don't know if you're aware, but it's not mandatory for sprinklers to be fitted when you're looking on the subject of retrofitting. That's very important. There is no legislation at the present moment. But what we do have in the United Kingdom, would you believe, in Scotland, Wales and England, we have different sets of legislation regarding the fitting of residential sprinklers. If I could start off with Scotland. In 2005, they made it compulsory for all new residential care homes and specialised housing and high-rise blocks above 18 metres in height to be fitted with sprinklers. And if I could go back a year, in 2004, I don't know if you recall, there was a major fire in the Scottish residential care home, Rose Park. Due to a number of unseen fortunate events, there was a fire involving an electrical cupboard, I believe, and we had over 13 fatalities from that particular incident, which is really sad news indeed, and possibly that incident was a kickstart for Scotland to go down this particular route to review the legislation on residential sprinklers. Moving on, in Wales, I would say they are now the market leaders in the world regarding the fitting of residential sprinklers. In 2016, they made it compulsory for all new and converted residential properties, including high-rise blocks, regardless of height, to be fitted with sprinklers as standard. Now, I think when we look further down the line in years to come, statistics will clearly show that the number of injuries, fatalities due to fire in Wales will be very much reduced. And I think when we look at the table, they will be at the bottom of the graph because of this bold step they've taken. And I applaud Wales to take in that direction. And that's the direction I think England should be taking as well. But we come to that a bit later. But in England, what do we have at the moment? Well, would you believe in 2007, they made it mandatory in Approved Document B for all new residential properties above 30 metres in height, that's 10 floors, to be fitted with sprinklers. And that's what we have in place at the present time. My colleague Stuart, he touched upon sprinkler position statements for fire and rescue services throughout the country. Like all organisations, London Fire Brigade have their own clear guidance and direction on how we want to proceed moving forward on suppression. I'm pleased to say now that our document has been totally reviewed. It's now a robust document, one page, and it has a number of key bullet points there. And I think I just want to bring some of those to your attention because I think they are a move in the step in the right direction and clarifies the approach that our Commissioner is taking on suppression at the present time. All new residential blocks above 80 metres in height, care homes and specialised accommodation should be fitted with sprinklers. Now that figure of 18 metres, we touch upon the Approved Document B, the legislation for England, that's 30 metres. We want to see that reduced to 18 metres. In addition to that, retrofitting. Very much in vogue at the moment for the obvious reasons, and we'll be discussing that a bit later through the presentation. But what London Fire Brigade would like to see is retrofitting brought into London for existing residential blocks, including care homes and a specialised housing as well. And we're looking at buildings over 18 metres in height. And just one thing on the actual subject of retrofitting, before you go down that particular approach, there's two provisos that you really have to focus on, and that's your fire risk assessment. You need to look at your fire risk assessment. That needs to be reviewed accordingly, and you need to focus on the risk profile of that particular building as well, the risk profile of your occupants. And of course, other residential properties as well, including hotels, hostels and student accommodation over 18 metres in height. And the last category, all new schools. Now, we touched upon that earlier. My colleague Nick in Midlands, I think he was located. I don't know if you're aware that in Scotland and Wales, it's mandatory for all new schools to be fitted with sprinklers as standard. But would you believe in England, we have something called Building Bulletin 100, which is the design document for schools. And in that particular guidance document, it states quite clearly that it's an expectation from government that all new schools, apart from low-risk schools, will be fitted with sprinklers as standard. Now, for me moving forward, I want to see all schools in England to be fitted with sprinklers for the obvious reasons. They are now a community resource. You have your breakfast clubs, you have your after-school clubs, so you have to look further outside the box. You know, we need to be looking at property protection as well. So, like all fire and rescue services throughout the country, we have our own position statement, and we want to see them installed in more of our most premises which have our most vulnerable residents as such. Future legislation, what's happening in the future? Well, we touched upon the independent review of building regulations and fire safety, which has been completed at the present time by Dame Judith Hackett. The interim report has been published. That came out just before December of last year. Very hard hitting, very critical of the building process, and I think when the final document is released in the next couple of weeks or the next month or two, I think there's going to be some real major changes and recommendations which is going to affect us all in the fire sector. So watch this space on that. London Assembly Planning Committee, they've been very proactive since post-Grenfell. They now publish this following, they've just now published this particular report. It's been put together, headed by a gentleman by the name of Navin Shah. And the one question coming out following post-Grenfell was, should sprinklers be made mandatory in London's homes? So, what London Assembly have done, they've done a review, they've got guidance from various people in the sprinkler industry, the London Fire Brigade, the British Automatic Fire Sprinkler Association, various sectors in the sprinkler industry, to try and find some information regarding reliability and the effectiveness of sprinklers. How can they be a benefit in the homes of the most vulnerable? And this report was just recently completed, published in March in 2018. It has some real key bullet points in there, and the main two recommendations which came out of that was that it was clearly proven that sprinklers do provide an extra layer of protection for the residents before the arrival of the London Fire Brigade or the Fire and Rescue Service, wherever that may be. It provides that extra layer of protection. In addition to that, from the evidence collated from this particular publication, it was clearly proven that there is a business case for sprinklers to be installed mandatory in all residential accommodation. In addition to that, the London Assembly made a number of key recommendations to government, 8 in total, and I just want to bring a couple of those to your attention. Firstly, this particular paragraph. We want to see government working with stakeholders in the sprinkler industry to develop a legislative roadmap with clear milestones making sprinklers compulsory in all residential buildings. And you've got to bear in mind, if we're going to take this approach of fitting sprinklers in all residential properties throughout the United Kingdom, wherever it may be, we need a clear approach on how to do that. Is there the actual resilience at the moment in the market with the contractors we have? We need to discuss it with the water undertakers, authorities having jurisdiction. We need a clear path going forward, how we can do that in a clear, structured roadmap, so to speak. And that's very important on that particular paragraph. In addition to that, London Assembly wants to see all new residential blocks over 18 metres in height, including care homes and specialised accommodation, to be fitted with sprinklers. And this is a real interesting one, this last bullet point. A matchmaking fund, £50 million. It sounds a lot of money. And what the London Assembly have proposed is for the government to put £25 million up and work together so they can fit sprinklers in 200 of the most high-risk properties in London, retrofitting. But why should London be an exceptional case? There's going to be high-risk properties throughout the country. So a real interesting document. It's available on the London Assembly website, and I'd really recommend that you download that in your own good time. High-rise. Why are we actually living in high-rise accommodation at the moment? Well, if you turn the clock back to 1960s, 1970s, we had a real glut of accommodation in the United Kingdom, and the answer from our architects, designers, was let's live in the sky. From that, we had over 4,000 high-rise buildings built. They were very much in vogue. They were built to the standards of that time, maybe one staircase as such, and they were the answer to the shortage of accommodation. But when we look further into that, regardless of the type of residential accommodation you have, you're always going to have fires. And of course, high-rise fires have real big implications for fire and rescue services throughout the country. And I just want to bring to your attention some of the most high-profile incidents over the last couple of years. We touched upon the Lacanau incident in London in 2009. 6 fatalities, multi-seated fire. And would you believe when that fire took place there wasn't sprinklers fitted? It's now been refurbished, it's now been reoccupied, and would you believe we still haven't got sprinklers in that particular block? Moving forward, Shirley Towers, 2010, centre photograph. We had 2 fatalities, and what's more hard-hitting for me is that it was the loss of 2 firefighters tackling that incident. If we had sprinklers in that building, would the outcome have been different? Possibly. I'm glad to say that that building has now been fitted with sprinklers. Bottom right-hand corner slide, Shanghai, 58 fatalities. The building was encompassed in scaffolding at the time, and we had 58 fatalities from that. And I must stress, sprinklers are not a compensatory measure for a dangerous facade. Most quite recently, which was brought to our attention by a colleague at an earlier presentation, Trump Tower, apartment block in New York, 1 fatality, 6 firefighters injured. The fire was on the 50th floor at the end of the day, and these type of incidents are the most complex incidents fire and rescue services can deal with. You're working at height, limited resources, 1 staircase. Firefighting these fires is entry via the flat door in the main. And of course, once you get over that figure of 18 metres, your resources are really limited. In London, our highest aerial ladder platform is 30.2 metres. Our longest ladder on my normal fire trucks is 14.1 metres at maximum extension. So you can see the limitations for us for tackling these types of incidents. So why are we having these fires at the end of the day? Well, from my experience as a fire safety inspecting officer, I've seen many fire safety, I've seen many fire risk assessments, and I've completed many fire safety inspections as well. And it comes down to 3 key areas at the end of the day. Passive fire measures not maintained, defective fire doors, self-closing devices missing, defective fire-resisting glazing, compartmentation breaches by others, your virgins, your gas boards, whoever it may be. You need to have a fire stopping procedure in place when you get these contractors on board and agreed before these works have started. Poor housekeeping. I know that slide is very excessive at the end of the day, but when we talk about residential buildings, it should be a sterile area. We shouldn't have poor housekeeping. We shouldn't have combustible materials in those particular locations. So what's the outcome of that? Well, potential fire growth. The risk is going to increase to our occupants and our firefighters. Time to escape is going to be compromised. And this is the outcome by having those poor 3 bullet points there. That's the outcome. So are sprinklers the answer? Well, for me, I am going to say that. I'm the sprinkler coordinator for the London Fire Brigade. But of course, they are one of a number of fire safety measures, packages, which can be introduced to your building. And of course, they aren't the silver bullet. Sprinklers are not the silver bullet. You need to look at your risk assessment. And we touched upon myths earlier. Here we go. We come back to our Hollywood film star again, Bruce Willis, at the end of the day with his cigarette lighter. When sprinklers operate, it's only the nearest sprinkler to the incident which will operate when it gets to that predetermined temperature of 67 degrees Celsius. You know, that's very much important at the end of the day. Data, we spoke about data earlier, and I think my colleague Stuart Rutledge, he mentioned about this fire safety document which was completed on behalf of the National Fire Sprinkler Network and the National Fire Chiefs Council. It's a key publication which you can use to publicise the effectiveness and the reliability of sprinklers. The actual data was taken from over 2,300 incidents involving fires and sprinklers. The data was collated from all the fire and rescue services throughout the country. It was from a 5-year period, and from that it identified that sprinklers were effective in 99% of all incidents, and that's all purpose groups. In addition to that, they had a reliability of 94%, and that's available to download on those particular websites. A really informative document to put the case forward regarding sprinklers. Post-Grenfell, there's been a widespread call to retrofit sprinklers in social housing, and like all fire and rescue services, London are no different. In conjunction with the sprinkling industry as well, we don't want knee-jerk reactions. We want sprinklers installed which are fit for purpose and do what they say on the tin. They are part of a package at the end of the day, and the systems really need to be fit for purpose. For me, moving forward, since post-Grenfell, I've been involved with a number of local authorities throughout London, providing guidance and advice. These are just a snapshot there. Look at the numbers involved. We're looking at over 200 there, and when you multiply that across the country, all the metropolitan areas, we're going to be talking in the thousands. Is there the resilience in the industry at the end of the day? That's a question you have to ask yourself. So what's our concerns, London Fire Brigade, the sprinkler industry? That knee-jerk reaction at the end of the day. Are systems fit for purpose? From my experience, dealing with local authorities, their knowledge and understanding regarding sprinklers retrofitting is very limited. You need to ensure that you complete your fire risk assessments accordingly before you carry out any kind of works regarding retrofitting. More importantly, you need to have that interaction with authorities having jurisdiction, your building controls, your fire and rescue services, your water undertakers. Very much key. You need that communication at the end of the day. We want systems which are fit for purpose. Third-party accreditation, very much key at the end of the day. Are your contractors you're going to ask to do that retrofitting fit for purpose? You need to get feedback. The cause and effect as well is very different. You've got different types of buildings. You need to ask for those fire strategies at the end of the day. Operational crews, is there that interaction? Have you got that information available for our crews to interact when we arrive with these systems? Very much key. So our approach to retrofitting in London, you've got me, the London Fire Brigade Sprinkler Coordinator. I'm responsible for Pan London. I'm glad to say that my superiors have realised that I've only got a certain resilience capacity. We're now going to be introducing sprinkler team leads at a local level. We're going to have 16 in place, hopefully quite shortly, when they have the appropriate competency. Guidance and advice. Regarding retrofitting, there is guidance and advice, and we identified quite early that the guidance was in short supply. We've now got a comprehensive guidance note available on retrofitting. That's available on our website, and it just gives you a snapshot on the areas that you need to consider and where you can go to get more advice from appropriate parties, whoever that may be. PBC Today, a building magazine. There's a great feature in there by the Chief Executive from the British Automatic Fire Sprinkler Association, Keith McGilvery. Really worth a read. It's available on the British Automatic Fire Sprinkler Association website, and it really focuses on our concerns regarding the approach to retrofitting. In addition to that, Callow Mount, you've probably all heard of this. It was completed following the Lacanelle fire. And basically it was a publication put together by the British Automatic Fire Sprinkler Association. And what it is, it's an exemplar, it's a building, specialised housing, where the building's been fitted with sprinklers, and it was clearly proven in this document that it could be done without decanting the residents. It was cost effective, it was value for money, and it could be done at the end of the day. And this publication is really worth a read at the end of the day. And once again, it's available on the BAFSA website. Benefits. I've touched upon a couple of benefits this approach has achieved for the London Fire Brigade. Direct contact and rapport with the local authorities and the care providers in question. Very much key. We've ensured that we've got the appropriate cause and effect. Delays are minimised once a contract starts. We ensure that we have the appropriate system which is fit for purpose at the end of the day, and the appropriate information for fire service crews. Thank you. I know that's been very quick and to the point, but we are limited for time, and I know you want to get to the next session. And many thanks indeed. And my question, what was it at the end of the day? Hopefully it appear. Should building regulations require all residential buildings over 80 metres, new care homes, specialised housing to be fitted with sprinklers immediately? Many thanks indeed.